Alright guys, so we are back for another training session for the YouTubes and the socials. What we're doing today, so we've got an upper, or what we have as upper day one. So we're looking at a few top set primary movements or compound movements. We'll be looking at some rows, some presses, and then we'll be going into a little bit of volumized accessory work. So we'll try, one of the things we want to try and do today as well is answer some questions. So we put up a box on the old Instagram. We'll try and get into some questions between sets as well if I have the breath to do it. So we're pretty much running the same, we've been running the same program, I think it's 6 weeks into this block, so it would have been the same program as the last month we did content. Mainly trying to maximize and push out or get the most out of the phase that we're in. A lot of time people will try and change programming when it isn't required and it's just sort of like, it's sexy to mix it up. Reality is there's a lot left in the tank, or there's a lot more to drain from the fruit, if you will, that we can get out of our body when we're training. So this program will probably last another couple of weeks, and then we'll move into the next more volumized phase of our programming. So we'll try and capture some intensity today, show you what the upper day might look like. It's about 5 or 6 exercises, and we'll try and grab some questions in between. So let's do it. All right, so first few exercises generally I'll do is like, I'll build up a bit more efficiently. So I'll take time to get warm and prime. So do a couple of builder sets or feeder sets, and then we'll work into our top sets before we go to back off. So with this, you'll probably see 2 or 3 sets before we get to the top weight. Generally, I'll just do a bit of a pump volume or lower rep range, anywhere between like 6 to 10 or 4 to 10, something like that in there. And then from there, I'll move into our actual working set so we don't fatigue too soon and we get the most out of our actual training sets. All right, so you've probably heard me talk about it 100 times on my content, but track your fucking training. It's not hard to keep tabs of what you're doing in order to progress. There's phases of this block where I've literally just grabbed an extra 2 reps in a set. Now, it doesn't seem like much, but if we're progressing each week at some degree, there is a form of progressive overload, stimulating hypertrophy. So if we're trying to grow and get the most out of our physique in a growth block, tracking your volume and knowing where your data is makes the most sense. This time last week, I was at 70s, but I was getting about, I think I got 11 or 12 reps. So rep target is 10 to 15. So before I progress weight now on these, I'll make sure that I'm controlling form and actually achieving the top of the rep count. Then from there, I can progress weight. It's easy when you're controlling data and you're controlling your variables, you can know what metrics you want to use to progress. So using a single metric progression model, simply titrating reps until we get, max out your reps until we get to the top of the rep target. I can then increase my weight the following week, repeat the same process. This might go to 80 in a couple of weeks, and then I might only get 10 reps, but then I'll get 10, 12, 13, 15, up it again to 90 or 85. So that way we're still continually seeking progression in some form, less slowly, less aggressively, but more consistent. So something else to pay attention to. My right side is predominantly my weaker side when it comes to these sort of movements. So I'll always predicate my rep targets, or predominantly try to predicate my rep targets on the weaker side first, so that the dominant side doesn't expand its growth rate and it's more consistent with my rate of progression. What do we got? How do you set up your training environment so that other lifestyle stress is not present during training? So a big thing for me that I find a lot of clients struggle with is giving themselves permission to train. A lot of the time when we first start getting into our training life, it's looked at as a chore or a task that has to get done out of almost bitterness or like a negativity. One of the things I like to do is try and create, sort of like if you've listened to Goggins, like he has Goggins when he trains. A similar premise to me is I'm trying to create someone that loves to fucking be here. And when I'm here, I give myself permission to be in that hour, 2 hour window where nothing else matters. I literally said to someone the other day, if my mum was to drop dead during my training session, she's not gonna be less dead because I've left the session early. So when I'm here, I have permission to be here and turn everything else off. I might reply to messages or I might check like question boxes, something like that. But when I'm here, I've given myself permission to make sure that in this training environment, I'm allowed to fucking be here and nothing else is in the way. All right, so what we've got here is 2 top sets, meaning that these will be the top, the higher working rep range, higher working weight. Then what we do is going to back off to a lower weight for a somewhat similar rep target. So I'll probably pull down about 30% per side and then drop back to about 10 reps. Just remember too, when we're looking at things like rowing, when it comes to back movements, a lot of people will just simply focus on either the contraction or the shortened position in this way, and then just simply let go. Like you watch people deadlift, they'll pull it off the ground, and then they're doing these ones. When it comes to back training, when it comes to any training really, we're trying to control the cadence at both the length and short position, but also the starting position and the finish position. So we're coming out for a stretch, in for a contraction. We're not simply just letting it go, letting tension off and coming back in. Don't get me wrong, get back to your starting position, but we're not trying to drop tension, let everything go, and then try and restart and get a whole new rep. It's not a pedale row where you're just simply trying to literally drop on purpose. A lot of people will just simply let shit go, end up missing the benefit of the contraction, the stretch of the back of back movements to begin with. Okay, so carbs around training in the morning when in a deficit. Do you prefer to load in the evening prior or just before? So this one is kind of personally dependent. If I've got someone that's like, they want to maximize their sleep up until a point to get up and just simply go to the training, I'll have them eat a bigger meal before bed, so they've got plenty of glycogen storage the night before, so it'll last them for when they're training. Now, if you've got a little bit of time in the morning, getting like a 30% chunk of your carbs in for the day pre-training will be a great way to go. You're gonna have plenty of fuel. Especially if you're in a deficit, we're trying to maximize the use of the carbohydrates around training. A lot of time we try and space it out and savor it, which is fine, we're still in a deficit. But if we're trying to fuel to maximize retention of muscle tissue, which is the point of a deficit, we're trying to drop body fat and retain muscle mass, then making sure that we've got adequate fuel for training is going to allow us to stimulate the most load, which will be able to retain as much muscle tissue. We're trying to tell the body to save the muscle that we want when we're in a state of low energy intake. Otherwise, the body will prioritize trying to break it down. So if we're having carbs around our training, they'll at least be able to make sure that we're training harder to retain that muscle. Tips for graduating shoulder press when stuck at a weight for too long. I'm going to mean graduating means progressing. Really easy one for this is if you're stuck at a weight, let's say you've got to the point where you're able to do, I don't know, 40 kilos for 10 to 15 reps, and you're getting around that 15 mark and you're pretty done. As I was saying before, a really easy single metric progression is pull back on the, increase your weight, you'll end up dropping the reps. Now, this has a variety of benefits, but you're kind of auto-regulating in the deload, so you're going to cut volume a little bit, but the likelihood is that 2 to 3 sets of 15 at that weight probably fatiguing you, so you can't get that next sort of rep out, the next weight out. If you hit that, drop back, increase the weight maybe, and then from there you're probably not dropping the rep range anyway and you'll be able to get more out. So is it as much that you can't get it up, or is it that you've got a bit of fatigue so you can't finish off the set, or you can't progress another rep? Once you get that rep target, drop back, increase the weight, you're probably finding you get the reps out anyway and then progress again. Another easy point for a lot of people who struggle to train to intensity or struggle to find intensity when training. If you're getting to your rep target and your first rep looks identical to your last rep, it's too easy. Though we know that volume matters, the debate of intensity matters as well. How close to failure are we training in order to stimulate the maximum amount of muscle tissue that we need to recruit the muscle, to drive the weight. And then from that, we're stimulating load. So how close to failure are we driving the body to get that benefit? Each rep, your last reps should be identically controlled or as close to as possible. The only variable you'll see different is speed. Once we get to that, you're reaching true failure. Alrighty guys, so we got single arm incline resting dumbbell row. So with this one, I'll use my hand to brace, have a degree of stability. More stability means I can generate more force and contraction. More contraction and force means that I can use more load. More load means more tension and growth, or stimulus, sorry. Okay, so tips for raising activity levels during a deficit. So one of the things that happens, I did a bit of content on this, we have this kind of what's called auto-regulation. So the body wants to adapt, it's very systematic, it's very adaptable. So if it recognizes that we're low on energy income and we're expending a lot, it will force us to slow down subconsciously without us realizing. So you'll fidget less, move less, park closer to the shopping center, you'll take less walking options, you won't take the stairs, you'll take the elevator. So subconsciously the body's gonna try and drive you to do less work to save that fuel. So some easy things are literally the counter opposite to that. Make sure that you're walking further. So park further away from the doors to the shopping center or wherever you go to get your groceries, or if you do weekly shopping, or park at the opposite end. Like if you got like a big Westfield or something like that, and you know you're going to Kmart and there's a car park this end, park as far away as possible. You're in the aircon or something like that, so you get some steps up, you're cool, grab a coffee or whatever, but you're walking further than you have to or than you want to, and it's going to drive you to have to come back that way as well, so your output's going to go up. Make sure you're hitting daily step targets. That's why we prescribe things like step targets, so we know that we can control that output and variable. When you're too low in fuel, you want to not do them. If we have that target, you can go, oh, that's right, that's what I need to do today. So a few things like that to drive output. Increase your sex life, increase your intensity in training where you can. Things like pacing during your sets, also really good options. Just little things like that that'll drive NEAT and general activity up to increase or dysregulate the slowdown of that process. All right, lateral raises. I like this machine, standing wing lateral raise. It runs on a moment arm, runs on a pretty prescribed mechanical pathway. Really easy tip for your lateral raise that people tend to get wrong is you're not trying to shrug and use your traps to raise the weight. Push down, as you're trying to push away from yourself, use your side or lateral head, almost like using your knuckles, to then drag up. So you're trying to drag the weight whilst you're pushing away. Okay, so we've got 3 sets of this, no back offs on these. Generally I'm not going to do a back off on an accessory work or accessory volume, just no need. I'd rather have controlled reps the whole way. All right, let's go another question while Philly's still here. Small wins versus large changes, what's your opinion? Okay, so when it comes to things like habit formation, we're trying to build routine or we're trying to change behaviors, a lot of the time people mistakenly try and do the largest things possible at once, and that leads to so much incongruence or inability to achieve it. Like let's say you've never trained before, or you've never done a 6-day program, or you've never done a diet. People remove every food group, or they'll remove every other variable. I'm going to train 6 days a week, 2 hours at a time. The likelihood of that succeeding is fucking abysmal. Being able to implement smaller changes progressively and start to stack on those, or as what James Clear calls habit stacking, we're trying to associate success with the smaller wins to generate momentum, and eventually you're going to go from 2 to 3 days a week to 4 days a week. Now you're doing cardio, now you're on top of your diet, there's less shit in your house, you know, it's harder to eat the cookies and the ice cream when it's not in the fridge, but you've got things you can enjoy like tracking some crumpets and Nutella or something like that. I love that. So being able to stack together small wins in the long term leads to larger changes anyway. I have all my clients review on their check-in sheet a small win for the week, non-appearance related, so not anything to do with how you look. What did you do well this week? Well, I got out of bed at 6 a.m. instead of 7, or I got my cardio in, or I did something at work, or I did something in my training. We're accruing small wins, and eventually what you find is those things become so monotonous and easy because you've done them so often, they're so simple now that it's not even a win, it's just part of your process, part of your habit. Whereas if you try and do the massive things at once, just imagine being one person trying to lift a fucking boulder. You can't do it. Start with the smallest rocks, it'll give you the most return. Then eventually you start to move weight. Something else we really need to take into account is recognizing your RPE in your training. So we have RAR, we have RPE. RAR is reps in reserve, RPE is your rate of perceived exertion. So you know how exhausting was that set? How close to a 10 if 10 is absolutely nothing left in the tank? So the reason for that is, even if we don't hit the same reps as last week, maybe we've had a shit sleep, maybe we've had a shit week, we've had a shit day, we didn't feed properly, we had to rush our training. Okay, so I might not have got the same reps, but what was my RPE? How close to exertion was I? How intense was I training still to make the most of what I was doing? Being able to perceive that is still a metric worth tracking so we know what's going on. What was my overall session RPE? Well, it was about a fucking 9. I sent it. Okay, so if I come back next week and all of a sudden that RPE is feeling like a 7, well, what was my sleep like? What was my hydration like? What was my food like? Then we can start to assess our metrics and variables and what's actually working and needs to be fixed. Other thing too, if you've been following, you'll see me sharing some content. Michael, who just walked past, he's 7 weeks out now from the state titles, IFBB. If that dude isn't taking a first timers and novice titles, I'll punch myself in the face. He is the condition I had times 3. He makes me look like I was still fat when I was on stage. It's getting ridiculous. It's funny when we all get imposter syndrome. Well, generally I would feel that people in like positions of coaching or education get imposter syndrome. I religiously question what I know and reassess what I'm doing and how can this be better? And then you see results like him and you're like, okay, kind of on the right track here, you might be doing something right. Best way that you can mitigate or interrupt negative self-talk with clients. Okay, so self-talk is an interesting one. Not everyone actually has internal monologue, which is interesting to me. Mine doesn't turn off. I didn't actually know that was a thing that people don't have quiet phases in their head. Mine is never not doing something. But we have for those who have internal monologue or conversational thought, things become habit. We become like habitual in our routine. So if we have a lot of like neuroticisms or insecurity, generally what will happen is we'll start to develop anxieties or perceived threat around a scenario. Like in order to avoid embarrassment or failure or problems or putting ourselves into a challenging position, we'll start to doubt ourselves and come up with stories that we shouldn't do something. So that's your negative self-talk process. If we do it enough and we don't interrupt it, it can become ingrained habit and will just become what we call system 1 and 2 of self-talk, which is basically just going to automate the response every time something comes up. Now there's different ways to go about correcting it. One of my favorite ways when it comes to sport or performance is they studied cricketers, and they found that by what they call technical self-talk, every time the batsman doubted themselves, instead of saying like, a big motivational speech or like, hey, let's get out and fuck this up, because cricket is such a slow-paced game, you can't stay at that high level of arousal. What you need to do is be able to stay in that high level of calmness or that zone through technical assessment. So if they know that they're driving the wrong way or misreading the bounce, instead of going, hey, you're a piece of shit, get better at your batting, we look at it and go, well, what's the process I need to execute? I need to worry about the bowler, I need to worry about me. I need to anticipate the ball, move into the direction, swing my bat at the right time, make sure that I'm angling it where I want it to go, perceiving the ball before it gets here. Those things then lead to understanding the process, recorrecting yourself, avoiding that doubt, and you're getting back in the process of executing. So you're assessing your performance with internal technical talk versus self-doubt and critical assessment. So you're not like, well, critical's good. Negative assessment. You're not attacking yourself for being shit because you missed a bouncer. That's fine, great, you missed one shot. Another way is that we look at baseballers. They would come to the base, and when it's their turn at the bat to swing, had they had a shit innings beforehand, the big thing that they were giving them to talk to themselves with was to forget the innings before and focus only on the play. When we start to perceive anxiety as future tense or past tense, we're either anticipating something that's happened before and we're scared of it, or we're anticipating something that could happen and we're scared of that. When we come back to the present and we simply recognize, hey, stop listening to those voices talking about before or after. What is happening right now? I'm at the bat and this is what I do. Self-talk, technical talk, move through it. Little things like that make all the difference when we assess how we're talking to ourselves and we're trying to execute something. When it comes to your squat, if you're scared of the weight you're under, instead of being like, oh fuck, that's 300 kilos or 200 kilos or 180, this is huge. Okay, what do I need to do with my squat? Break at the knees, brace my core, hinge, knee flexion, get to the bottom, drive out, make sure I'm contracting everything, keep my core tight, focus on lifting up. All these things, really easy. That talk makes a bigger difference in process execution versus, fuck, this is heavy, I don't know if I can do it, I'm scared, my knees are shaky, I'm not focusing on my lift. Just focus on the next play, the next bat, assess the technical system, and then from that you can look at positive language, cognitive reappraisal. I'm not good at this yet. I haven't done this before. I will do. I'm pretty shit at this. Okay, so is everyone. Interrupting the automated self-talk response is a much more proficient way of improving negative self-talk by correcting and allowing yourself to understand it will get better or you'll be better or there's a technical cue to get through it. Oh shit. All right, that's the end of that, guys. So make sure you are liking, following, subscribing, commenting, whatever the other things are that people prompt you to do. If you would, we'll appreciate it.